Known for her plethora of titles, Virgin of Virgins, Holy Mother of God, Queen of All Saints, Queen of Mercy, Queen of Peace, the Virgin Mary has been the single most often depicted female figure in Renaissance art. Because of the consistency of her depictions in various art forms throughout Europe and the Renaissance by most painters, the inventions and advancements of arts are easy to follow simply by examining the Virgin Mary throughout their artistic movements. Today we will be analyzing two paintings depicting the Virgin Mary. The first one is Madonna and Child by Lorenzo Monaco, and the second one is the Madonna of Humility by Robert Campin. But before we get into analyzing these artworks, a brief history about the Virgin Mary and her importance in art through the ages. In the pre-Renaissance era, the Virgin Mary was depicted as a noble figure. She was often enthroned, surrounded by the angels, and bathed in the celestial light. In this style of pre-Renaissance depictions, the Virgin Mary carrying baby Jesus was the center and the focus of the painting. However, in the late Middle Ages, she began to take on a more approachable, almost peasant-like appearance. During this time, the tender and motherly characteristics of the Virgin Mary were revealed, as the painters emphasized the relationship between mother and son. Considering the period in European history, this shift may have been the common phenomena of the Church depicting their holy figures in a way that the vast majority of the common folk could relate to, essentially attracting more people into Christianity. Also, the settings of paintings transitioned from depicting her on a throne and into the outdoors, often just seated on the floor cradling baby Jesus. This shows extreme similarity to depictions of Venus, more vivid, free, and somewhat more natural than the rigid portrait-like depictions. Drawing from this brief connection to Venus, both figures, though different in time frame as Venus was more often portrayed in neoclassical style, as the Virgin Mary continued to be portrayed throughout the early and high Renaissance, were major figures of femininity and a strong source of empowerment for women. I chose to analyze these two paintings to focus on the changes and continuities of how the Virgin Mary was depicted throughout the Renaissance period. This change in style must mean that not only was there a change in perspective in the artistic world, from the unrealistic pre-Renaissance paintings to the naturalistic late Renaissance paintings, but there must have also been a social change, possibly in society's interpretation of Virgin Mary's depiction, and possibly a change in women's expectations and roles as well. Madonna and Child by the pre-Renaissance painter Lorenzo Monaco is bathed in the traditional rich colors of red, blue, and gold. Monaco uses the graceful rhythm of lines between the paintings to create a sense of surreal motion from the flared bottom of the dress. Because this painting is of the pre-Renaissance era, the proportions and dimensional composition of the painting lacks accuracy, as the Virgin's face seems disproportionately large compared to her hand. Also, her baby Jesus lacks the realisticness that does not emerge until the late Renaissance paintings. He looks like a small man rather than an infant. Both figures' poses seem unnatural and stiff, as they lack the realistic flow of body movements despite the tilted heads and flowing dress. The several symbols in this painting should also be noted. Traditionally, in pre-Renaissance paintings, the background was painted gold to represent the glowing halo of the holy figure. This characteristic of the painting is what took away its depth, therefore creating a flatter, two-dimensional look. Second, the Virgin Mary is often draped in blue, as this color symbolizes the purity of the Virgin Mary. As stated earlier, this pre-Renaissance painting depicts the Virgin Mary as a more noble figure, noted from her enthroned figure and gold-encrusted dress. Credited as one of the first artists to paint realistic depictions of his subjects, Robert Campin of the Italian Renaissance produced a painting with identical subjects, however significantly different from Monaco's Madonna and Child. Although the Madonna of Humility exhibits some similar characteristics from Madonna and Child, such as that they are both wearing blue dresses and they both have representative halos, the two paintings differ greatly, perhaps as a result of the advancements in artistic style. As opposed to Madonna and Child, where Mary and baby Jesus are the main and only subjects of the painting, the Madonna of Humility portrays a beautiful scenery where the Virgin and the Christ infant are humbled and one with nature. Rather than sitting on a throne, the Virgin sits on a pillow on the grass, surrounded by flowers and many more symbolic objects, such as an open Bible to represent her submission to the holy will of God. The Madonna of Humility is a painting abundant in bright colors and accurate, proportionate features. Despite the two-dimensional halos, baby Jesus has the proportions of an actual child, and the Virgin Mary looks much more comfortable and natural with her knees visibly bent to the side under her dress while she kneels on the floor. Campin also shows great perception when he successfully depicts the detailed background along with a sharper, clearer foreground. Common but often overlooked detail of Mary's paintings is that she is always gazing down and away from the viewer. This may have been to symbolize their solemnity and maturity, or even foreshadow the sadness of the tragic death of her own son. Whatever the profound intention of the painters, it shaped the expectation of women for the audience of the time. Mary's submissive gaze significantly shaped society in that women were expected to be tractable, subjugated, and motherly. Essentially, people expected women to meet the impossible ideals of being the perfect mother and the perfect virgin. However, considered in the more positive long run, the Virgin Mary was a source of empowerment to women of the time. According to the Christian history, she was credited for being the medium for carrying out God's plan. The Virgin was also Jesus' sole connection to humankind. The tender, caring, and approachable side of Jesus essentially came from the upbringings of Mary. This time, this was a significant leap for the representation of women in society. Mary's continuity as the most depicted figure in the Renaissance art undoubtedly earned her the veneration of society as a generous and kind-hearted mother to all. Not only was she the mother of the Savior, so even Jesus had to fulfill all of her requests, she was the embodiment of the representation of the Church. The Virgin Mary's respected position as a mother and a woman definitely paved the way towards a society where women were viewed not only as magnanimous and tender figures, but also respected as steady and wise females as well.